All right, everybody. Welcome into the Go 24/7 podcast. I am Glenn West. That is Sonny Ship. We have one game remaining here in the non-conference schedule for about 6 to 8 weeks here, as LSU is going to get into their heart of their SEC schedule after this weekend against Southeastern. That kickoff is coming at, I believe, 6:30. So another Saturday night in Death
45,
Valley.
6:45.
6:45. 6:45. Okay, sorry, I got you off by 15 minutes there.
0 for
So
1 already.
it'll be another Saturday night in Death Valley. So that'll be very fun, very interesting to watch. But just kind of wanted to hop on and give some of our final thoughts on this game before before the conference schedule kind of kicks in. But before we get into all that, let's first just like to ask you guys to subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave us a review, leave us some comments, and then also leave a like and review wherever you're listening to your podcast as we try to grow this thing out to reach as many LSU fans as possible. So, with that being said, Sonny, another non-conference game here, a game that LSU should probably handle pretty easily. I'll open it up to you first, kind of leave it open-ended, and then I'll hop in. But just what are a couple things you're looking for this weekend against Southeastern?
If I see Garrett Nussmeier touch a ball coming out of halftime, someone needs to be fired.
Okay.
That's the main thing.
All right.
That's the main thing.
Pretty blunt, be
Because
honest.
if you're going to play your quarterback when you know he's not 100%, and you got all these SEC games coming up, you say that he can't get hurt, that he can't hurt himself really any farther. But we know I don't think that's the case. You can always take a shot, and who knows what's going to happen. But he absolutely does not need to touch the ball in the second half. You need to give him some rest. You need to give him some time off. You need to get him 100%. And um, you've got to help him out. You've got to come out with a game plan that is not vanilla, that is not in the mindset of, okay, let's not give any Ole Miss anything else to see on film. If you want to get him some quality reps this week, and it sounds like, I know that he wants to play. Of course he wants to play. I've never known a kid who loves a sport who doesn't want to be on the field when it's crunch time. And so but you have to help him out. You have to be the adult in the room. You have to come out with a game plan that if you're wanting to show this offense what it's got, you want to connect on some deep balls, you want to get the passing game going, then you do it. You set him up in the right situation. If you come out with this vanilla offense, with this conservative approach, and you're just hoping that your one-on-ones are going to beat the people in front of you, it's going to be such a disappointing night.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Look, I think LSU should come out and dominate this game offensively. I think they should play with an edge and play really aggressive and come out and take some shots and really try to open things up. I think offensively, I would love to see them dominate on the ground, like just really, even if it takes a couple extra blockers in there, really just try to open up the game for Caden Durham, for Caleb Jackson, for Harlan Berry, try to get those guys on the perimeter. Just try to get a lot of feel good momentum, I guess, going into the Ole Miss game for that offense. And I think it starts with physicality. I think it starts with efficiency up front. That's something that Brian Kelly's talked a lot about this week in terms of what they're working on with their offensive line and the technique stuff that they're working on in the run game. I'd love to see that come to fruition against a team like Southeastern that you should be able to push around a little bit. But yeah, like to your point, if they're going to play Garrett Nussmeier, you don't want to just have him dink and dunk the ball and have all the playmakers go make the plays. I would want him to air it out a little bit. And if he's really improving the way that they think he is health wise, he should be able to air the ball out 20, 30 yards and really get
Or
a
you
lot of
don't
his.
play.
Yeah. Or you don't play him. Yeah, exactly.
You don't
And
play them.
yeah, yeah, like that they have to start getting into more of a downfield passing attack groove heading into Ole Miss and certainly South Carolina in several weeks from now as well. So, yeah, I think offensively that's certainly we touched a lot about the offense earlier this week. I think defensively for me, I just, want to see these guys get out healthy, right? I mean, you just hate for another Weeks situation to happen where, and it doesn't sound like Weeks is going to miss a ton of time, if any. I certainly wouldn't play him this week if he's still hampered
You
even a
talking
little
about
bit.
West?
Oh, West. That's, did I say West? Did I say
West.
West?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You
I
said
might have.
West.
Oh man, it's early. All
I was
right.
like,
Yeah.
wait. The suspension
West,
doesn't carry over. He missed
West
the
and
whole
East.
game.
West and
I
East.
got you.
Yes.
Got
Yes.
you. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you hope that they can get out healthy, and Witt will be back into the lineup and playing a little bit here. But I think it's a great opportunity defensively to really test your depth and see what kind of guys behind the main core players at each position can get in there and get some reps. You could potentially see Zach Weeks on the field next to his brother Witt. I think there's some really interesting opportunities there to get a lot of number of players involved. Ashton Stamps at cornerback. Some of your safeties. Deshaun Spears can maybe play more than 9 snaps after a 2 interception game last weekend. Would like to see even guys like young players, Damian Shanklin on the edge, Kalaj Cobbins on the edge, who had a really nice fall camp, but just hadn't had a ton of those playing opportunities yet this year. Like, I think this kind of game can really open things up defensively, just in terms of the number of personnel you're running out there, and really just kind of give those starters and those core pieces maybe a little bit of an extra breather in this game before you really get into the heat of your SEC schedule. So that's what I would say.
Let me ask you a question too.
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt you,
No, go
but
for it.
how pissed off are you going to be if LSU comes out with Garrett Nussmeier in the first half and the focus is on getting the running game going? Because couldn't
I
Michael
think,
Van Buren do that?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, Van Buren can do
You
that.
know, if LSU's goal is to come out and establish the run, line up, and just try to play bully ball,
Yeah,
then why are you bringing Nussmeier out there?
yeah,
You know what I
it's
mean?
a fair point.
I mean, if I'm a fan, and as a fan, if the whole purpose of he wants to play, we feel like he's better now to where we can work on things that we haven't been able to work on, then that's fine and dandy. But then you better work on them.
Yeah,
You need to work on them. Because the same thing that you can get done in practice, you can also get done during the game week of Ole Miss.
yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of things that they do need to work on, and I agree with that. But I think when you look at the risk reward situation, the only way that it makes sense for you to get the reward, a bigger reward than a bigger risk, is for you to work on the things that have truly you haven't been able to utilize this year. And it's what we've seen. It's what your strength was going to be on offense, and we haven't seen it through 3 games yet. Now, is it terminology? Is it philosophy? Is it the injury? Whatever it is, those points are not meeting in the middle.
yeah,
And so that begs the question for me then, and I agree that, hey, I want to see him come out and run the ball. You'd love to see him run for 300 yards against Southeastern and really get that run game going. I'm with you. I think the passing game is going to be fine, but you got to get that trigger man to where he is in the prime situation for him, and obviously he's not there right now.
yeah. I
I
think,
don't know if it's being downplayed a little or what it is. I mean, for Brian Kelly to mention the injury at all tells me he's on the downside of it. You know, that
yeah.
tells me that he's on the
Oh,
back.
that he's
He's on the
coming down.
back end of it. Yeah, he's
That
on
he's
the
yeah.
back
Okay,
side of
okay,
the
yeah,
injury
yeah,
because
okay,
otherwise he wouldn't even mention that. I mean, that would just
yeah,
be a bonehead move.
yeah,
So they must feel pretty good about that. But I think it's still, I think it's still that, if you got somebody at 95 and you got this grind of a schedule coming up, I'm okay with them playing Nussmeier. I'm okay with it if that's what they do. But if you do that, you better not just come out and just run the ball and just look to get off the field because then you've missed so many opportunities, in my opinion, of seeing what Michael Van Buren and Colin Hurley can do during a game week to where,
yeah,
hey, you're 1-2 this week. Now your preparation has to be a lot different than it is as 2 and 3. And
yeah,
so I think that there's so many benefits that you can get from him not playing that if you are going to play him, then you still have to get some of those other benefits.
Yeah,
And to me, establishing a running game against Southeastern, running for 300 yards against Southeastern, to me, that doesn't do anything for me.
yeah.
As far as why we're playing.
I think my rebuttal to that would probably be that I think you can probably accomplish both in a half. Like I think that you can accomplish enough or establish enough of a running game in a half while also airing it out and testing, kind of the complementary pieces of football. I'm not saying you go out there in the first half and run it with Caden Durham 15 times. I'm saying, you
Right.
go out there and run it, 7, 8 times in the
Yeah.
half, pass it another 9 or 10 times, and that should lead you to some really good results. I mean, like I think LSU's offense should be fairly efficient in this game if they're able to, like I said, get a good push up front on the offensive line, have Durham and those running backs hit the perimeter and get into the second level and pick up 20, 30, 40-yard gains on the ground. I think that makes them feel a lot better. I think it makes certainly the passing offense feel a lot better if Nussmeier is able to have a clean pocket and throw the ball down the field 20, 30 yards to Barryon Brown and Nick Anderson. And, hopefully maybe Chris Hilton can maybe get involved. And I think there's enough that you can learn in a half to where it can be beneficial for Nussmeier to play. But yeah, I'm in agreement there. I don't think that it means that you go out there and just hand the ball off every single time, and because that is a vanilla strategy. Like
Yeah.
that is not a strategy that's going to work next week against Ole
You
Miss.
almost have to have the mindset of this is two different games right here.
Yeah,
We're playing the first half and we're playing the second half.
yeah,
And you need to have the offensive attack to do that. To say,
yeah.
okay, we got 30 minutes. Let's see what we can do in 30 minutes.
Because
And
the
so when you cut the game in half like that, you're like, okay, so some of these bigger plays that we may not, you're looking for those explosive plays. You're looking for those chunk plays like you talked about on the ground. You're looking for those big time plays that, you know, instead of an 8 play drive, it's a 3 play drive,
right,
you
right,
know.
yeah,
And so that's what this offense has really been missing so far. So, I think there's a lot that you can get out of that. I'm just skeptical that we're going to see that kind of approach
oh,
to where you look at it to where it's like, okay, Garrett, you got 2 quarters. You are
yeah,
not getting in that third quarter. So whatever you do, we've got to have the game plan surrounding that to where that's the mindset.
and,
Because if this game drags on into the third quarter, and then you end up getting Van Buren in the last series of the third quarter, I think you just wasted such an opportunity. You
yeah.
know.
That's very true. And I think, look, the time of possession should be another thing that I think you should be able to dominate in that first half. Like if the offense doesn't have the ball for like 20 minutes of the first half, because I think the defense is just going to get on the field and get right off against Southeastern. Like you should be able to have a lot of possessions there in that first half to really work on a lot of the things you want to work on. And so I agree with you though. If this thing goes into the third quarter and Nussmeier's still in there and it's 21-3 or 25,
28-10 or
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Like there's nothing much that you can glean from that other than the fact that you're losing opportunities for guys like Van Buren and Colin Hurley and maybe some of the guys lower on your depth chart, maybe some of the younger offensive linemen like Carius Kern or Cohen Eccles or some of the guys that you're trying to see if you can't rotate in throughout the season. You can give those guys some opportunities against a team like Southeastern. So there's just a number of different things that I think you can work on, going into the rest of your SEC play here. So with that, I guess we can get into our predictions here. We're going to talk a little bit of recruiting after that. I you know A lot to a little is my prediction. I think LSU's offense comes out and they're pretty efficient in the first half. They get Nussmeier involved. They get a number of different players involved. Van Buren takes over, I think, in the second half. Maybe you get a series or two with Colin Hurley towards the end as well. But yeah, I think the offensive strategy should be to come out aggressive, really establish both the run and the pass. I think you can do both in a half, given the amount of time you should have with the ball as an offense in that first half. And I think they come out and they do a nice job of just being efficient, scoring touchdowns, not settling for field goals. When the field shortens, you go in there and you convert the touchdown. And I think they have some explosive plays riddled throughout as well. So a good feel-good game for the offense leading in the SEC play. Defense gets on the field, gets right off. I think all those things are very much in play, and LSU should win this thing a lot to a little. I'm not even going to put a score on it just because I don't think it's going to be very close at all.
Yeah, I think you put it well, a lot to a little, and I really don't know. You know, if this game, if this game is not in the mid to late 40s to 6 or 10, if you allow more than three scoring opportunities, unless you play a ton of people, in the second half, unless we see guys like Walter Mathis, who's gotten like 7, 8 snaps a game, we see him get 20,
Yeah,
22 snaps a game. We see Zach Weeks, Tylen Singleton, those guys getting 20, 25 snaps a game. Seeing Ashton Stance get some snaps, seeing those guys. If those guys get a lot of play time in the second half and you're talking mid 40s to 17 or whatever, I'm not that disappointed.
yeah,
I'm not that disappointed about that. But I think the key that this weekend is that you got to get a lot of guys playing time. Because if you look at Clemson, you look at Florida, and really even Louisiana Tech, yeah, a lot more guys got in Louisiana Tech, but then they only played like one series,
yeah,
maybe two series at the most. So you haven't, these non-conference games, Southeastern, Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech, these three games right here, you've really got to be able to, you've got to use those games as means to get the other guys on the field. How do you get the other guys on the field? You put your foot on the opponent's throat and you choke them out in the first half.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
how you do that. And so I just hope that the game plan matches that mindset.
yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And I think, like I said, I think LSU comes out and does the things that they're supposed to do in the first half, in particular, to where I think hopefully Garrett Nussmeier can just take it easy for the last 30 minutes, and you can get some of those other guys involved. So,
On
um,
autographs for the last 30
yeah,
minutes.
yeah, absolutely.
You're
Yeah,
like the Vanderbilt, get on your phone, whatever.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Go say hi to your brother in the stands.
Yeah.
And I guess speaking of the brother, speaking of Colton Nussmeier, we wanted to kind of just touch on some recruiting stuff here in 2027 and taking a look ahead to this class now that they have their first guy in line here with Peyton Houston at quarterback. And I did kind of just want to lead this thing off because I was just doing some research and kind of looking back because obviously one of the big questions is, can LSU grab two of these guys? Can they go out and get Peyton Houston plus Colton Nussmeier, Peyton Houston plus Elijah Haven in this 2027 class? And look, we got 15, 16 months until the ink is dry on this class, and so there's just a ton of time to see how all this plays out. But I did go back and I looked at some of the other recruiting classes here of recent. Um, kind of going back to that 2020 year where it was kind of the last year where they divided the pro style quarterbacks and the dual style quarterbacks. Really, since that season, 2026, I look back, the top 20 quarterbacks in that class are all at different schools. The same can be said for the 2024 class and the 2022 class. But there are a few exceptions to the rule. In 2023, you had Eli Holstein, who was the number 12 quarterback in the country, and Dylan Lonergan, who was the number 16 quarterback in the country. They both signed with Alabama. You had a couple of years prior to that, you had Jackson Dart and Miller Moss, who were part of the same recruiting class. Those were two top 15 quarterbacks as well.
USC, right?
Yeah, at USC.
USC?
And
Yeah.
then, most recently here in 2025, Oregon was able to sign a pair of top 15 quarterbacks. I'm going to butcher this name, but Jaron Kiao. I'm not even going to bother with the last name. It's going to be a real tricky
We'll
one,
go
but
Jared.
Jaron, yes, he was the number
Double A
7
man.
quarterback in the country. and Akili Smith Jr. Was another top 15 passer, and then North Carolina also signed a pair of top 20 quarterbacks in the country. But kind of my whole point here, and what I'll make in the article, and what many of you will be seeing on our message board by the end of today, when you're listening to this potentially, is that none of these classes have really been able to get a top 10 quarterback and then another top 5 or 6 option on top of that. That's really playing with rich royalty here, to expect that you're going to get Peyton Houston, who could very well rise from his current number 11 ranking firmly into the top 10. I mean, by the end of this thing, I mean, we talked with Andrew Rivens, who is our national recruiting director, and he said point blank that Houston's the best pure thrower of the football in this class. So, if he continues to develop physically and continues to show out in these camps, he could easily be a top 7, 6, 5 quarterback in the country by the end of this thing next year. So, how that plays out with Nussmeier and Haven, I'm still kind of leaning towards you'd just be very, very lucky and very, very rich if you were able to pull that off. I think LSU, to its credit, has built great relationships with both Haven and Nussmeier, particularly I think Nussmeier, and just kind of the family ties and the relationship with the coaching staff. Like, I think that's something that's very real. But it's just going to be so hard to pull off 2 of those guys, I think, in this class. And I did kind of want to get your thoughts on this as well, just kind of what you think the realistic opportunity is as you look ahead, as LSU's being able to sign 2 of these top 3 options that they have.
Well, in those classes that you mentioned, obviously Alabama sticks out. Dylan Lonergan, how long did he even last?
No, I mean, Lonergan and Holstein were both gone by the next year, and I think part of that
Okay,
was because Nick Saban retired.
and then if you look at USC, Moss stayed, but I
Yeah,
think Dart left after 1 year, if
yeah,
I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
You know, and so I think that I think probably an interesting metric in those 2 quarterback classes is going to be, okay, how long did either stay?
yeah.
Because the 2 that you mentioned at Oregon, the only reason I remember Akili Smith Jr. is because of his dad.
Hmm.
Um,
And he was a
I don't.
he was the number like 22 quarterback too. Like, he wasn't like a top
Yeah.
12, 15 kind of guy.
Yeah.
So,
And then the
uh,
dude's name that you butchered. I mean,
yeah,
when you said Jared, that threw me off right there because I was like, okay, I don't ever remember anybody at Oregon throwing passes named Jared, and so I think that would be interesting too. Is that signing these 2 quarterback, signing 2 high class quarterbacks like that in the same class is almost like you're throwing money away.
yeah,
Because when you look at those dynamics of those 2 quarterback classes and how long those guys stayed, you're paying one of them some good money for the first year.
yeah,
You know, if you sign 2, you can almost bet one of them's leaving.
yeah, for
And
sure.
out of those, and whichever one leaves, you're getting a negative return on your investment from the
Yeah,
very beginning.
and it just really
You know,
depends on what the reward is, right? The reward is you get a good look at both of those guys for 1 year. You get to develop them. You get to see which one maybe you think is the future of your program. And so, from that respect, maybe it's worth it. But at the same time, it's like you're playing with house money there, where those kinds of resources and funds could maybe be going to an elite receiver or an elite defensive lineman, offensive lineman, whatever the case may be. So, yeah, I agree with you there. I think that's, you'd love to have 2. You'd love to see them stick around for multiple years. But I think just living in the reality of where we are in this modern age of college football, it's where can I go get developed quickly? Where can I get on the field quickly? And when you sign 2 guys that are expected to be as highly touted as those 3 are, it's just really hard to see a scenario where 2 of those guys could see the field at LSU.
kind of like me trying to convince my wife to let me have another wife. You know. Oh, this was 20 years. This was 20
Move to
years
Utah,
younger.
yes. Move to Utah. Yeah,
That's about the only place that's allowed. But
yeah,
yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I think it's going to be very tough. But I do think, I do think there is a lot to be excited about when you look at the 2027 class from the LSU perspective. That you got a quarterback. You got a quarterback who the day after he committed is already reaching out to Easton Royal, to Albert Simeon. You go down the list.
Ahmad Hudson. Yeah.
We yeah, we've got a dozen. We've got a dozen guys in Louisiana reporting LSU offers right now for the 2027 class. The crazy thing about it, and forgive me as I'm glancing over here just to make sure I have these numbers right, but out of those 12 offers, 10 are on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
The only two are at safety for Karan Eugene, the four-star safety out of Catholic High in New Iberia, and then Jaden Anding, who is
Corner.
2025 signee Aiden Anding's
Yeah.
younger brother. And so you've got those two guys right there, but then when you look at some of the positions. I mean, just the skill positions on offense. You've already got three receivers. You got the two at St. Aug, McQuan Whitley and Raekwon Williams, along with Easton Royal, the five-star receiver out of Brother Martin. You go, offensive line. You would definitely like to see some more offensive linemen emerge, especially some defensive linemen, and I'm sure that that's going to happen. But whenever those numbers are low, especially in the trenches, and LSU has to go out of state to fill those positions, I think is when you start. I think is when you kind of start to put the white flag up a little bit, or
Yeah.
whatever the caution flag, whatever color your caution flag is, because filling those two spots predominantly outside Louisiana is where I think that LSU has kind of found itself in a little bit of a pickle
Yeah.
in recent classes. And so you would really like to see more big men emerge. And like I said, there's a ton of time to go. A lot of them are going to emerge, this season as they're playing their junior season. But those are some positions that just really just kind of stick out to me. And then you look at Braylon Calais out of
I was gonna
Sicilian.
say. Yeah.
Where's he going to play at? He could play running back. He could play receiver. He could probably switch over and play
Xavier
somewhere in the
Thomas.
secondary.
Look at
Hey,
Xavier Thomas.
exactly, right?
There's your
Exactly,
role.
huh? We're telling Davion Thomas. The only problem is he's about 5 inches taller than Savion.
That's true. He's a big kid.
Zavion's about 5'9", 5'10" on a good day. Well, maybe
Yeah.
5'11".
Yeah.
But so just looking at that 2027 class, you got some good pieces that you can kind of like really build around. But I think in the trenches is where we're going to have to see them go outside the state. And look, Kyle Williams had the number one defensive tackle in the country out of Texas, Jalen Brewster. He had him in for the Florida game. So, obviously, whenever you've got a number one player at a position, a defensive line position like that, offensive lineman in Texas, Texas A&M,
I would.
all those schools are
Yeah.
gonna. He's not gonna be an easy pull. Is kind of the point that I'm trying to make. Is that he's gonna have a high value. He's gonna cost a lot of money and things like that. But when you get a guy like that on your campus this far in advance, it really kind of sets you up for, okay, if you can get him back for another unofficial visit, then I think you really kind of start to get a sense of, okay, LSU's really going to be in this race right here.
Well,
So I think when you look at guys like that, that's kind of the cue you're looking for now. It's like, okay, we got him in, we got his interest. Now let's see if we can get him in again.
yeah.
And I think that'll be the test for Texas A&M for
Let me ask
I'm
you
trying
about
to
let me ask you about one guy that was from Louisiana, moved to Florida, Zyron Forstall, the defensive end. He's at IMG Academy now. I would imagine he's somebody that LSU has spent a lot of time trying to build a relationship with over the last year. Obviously, he goes to IMG, and now you're hoping to get him in as many times as possible. Obviously, he still has a lot of family here. I would imagine he's going to be one of those big guys in the trenches that LSU is looking to um, add as a part of this class. Do you get the sense that
yeah,
that's
yeah.
a realistic possibility?
Yeah, and he's about 6'2", 6'3", 230, 235. So I think he's going to be that edge rusher.
Yeah,
He's definitely I think he's definitely a guy that has interest in LSU. LSU's interest is reciprocal in the sense of you would expect. a guy like that just to be, such a high priority. And I think he is. What kind of worries me, and what I'm going to kind of be keeping an eye on is Jakeem Stewart. We had, LSU was in a real good spot for Jakeem Stewart at one point, and then
Yeah,
USC just really just came in and just kind of just once they grabbed that momentum, never really let it up.
yeah,
I'm anxious to see, with Forstall being a defensive lineman out of New Orleans, if he kind of ran in some of the same circles, some of the same training circles as Stewart, and whether or not you're going to kind of see some of that influence,
yeah,
whether or not you'll see, him look at, oh, well, everybody says you need to stay in state, go to Louisiana. Well, look, Jakeem went out to USC and, he's doing good out there. He's liking it out there. So I'm anxious to see dynamic, how that dynamic works out. And then also, one thing about these kids is once they get to IMG, and they leave like their local areas, it's almost like, I mean, okay, look, it's not a secret, right? We don't have to keep secrets anymore in recruiting now that everybody's getting paid, right? We know IMG recruits high school kids.
yeah,
We know they're recruiting high school kids. We know they're giving them scholarships and things like that. And so I worry about kids when they get it to a place like IMG and they get their claws in these kids. And then they start using these national, these national, what's the word, connections that they have, connections to other places, connections to other schools, connections to coaches and things like that. And then how does that dynamic affect the in-state dynamic? That LSU has if he is still going to school in New Orleans. And
yeah,
so that's going to be an interesting one to kind of track and to follow to see which path he takes. Is he more along the lines of a Lamar Brown,
yeah,
or is he more in the lines of along the lines of Jakeem Stewart, and that you know Brown saw the benefits, sees the benefits of staying home, sees that, and obviously he's getting, nice NIL opportunities and all of that. But he chose that path, whereas we saw Stewart take a different path. And so I think it'd be interesting to see,
yeah.
which path he ends up taking.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Well, I think that's pretty much all I have. I think that's a good place to kind of end it there. LSU obviously will have a number of guys in again this weekend against Southeastern. Anybody that is kind of sticking out? I mean, I assume it's going to be a lot of local guys, a lot of maybe kind of getting
Yeah,
to know.
it's a lot of local guys, a lot of younger guys. You know, you they had a good big weekend for the
Yeah,
Louisiana Tech. You followed that up with Florida. It's kind of hard to do 3 weekends in a row because,
yeah,
like, these guys who are coming in, especially 2026 class, even 2027 class, they're like, okay, do I
I've
want to
been
go
here.
watch?
We've done it
I don't
every
even know if Texas A&M's playing Auburn. I'm just throwing this out there. Do we want to go watch Texas A&M play Auburn this weekend, or do we want to go watch LSU play Southeastern?
Or do we just want to chill at home? Or do we just want
Chill
to
at
chill at
home.
home?
Exactly. I want to hang with my lady,
Yeah,
or my lady.
yeah,
Maybe they're lucky enough to have plural.
yeah,
But anyway, so it's tough to do that 3 weeks in a row, especially when you got Louisiana Tech and Southeastern as two of those games, because
yeah.
you want to get these guys back
For South
for
Carolina.
SEC
Yeah,
games, for South Carolina, for Texas A&M, for games
yeah,
like that. Arkansas, not Arkansas, but the games at home. You want to get those guys in for those games, and so
yeah,
I think this would be you'll see a lot of you'll see them really kind of start to expand on 2028,
yeah.
2027 guys, but I think you'll really see them start to really kind of expand on that 2028 class.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, should be another fun weekend in Death Valley. Hopefully, LSU does some of what we were talking about here to start the thing off. But yeah, we'll have all your coverage for you this weekend. We'll catch up with all recruits that we need to if whoever shows up, whoever we see on the field pregame, things of that nature. And yeah, just make sure you guys are staying in tune with us on the message boards. We'll be all over it this weekend as LSU hosts Southeastern for its final non-conference game here for a couple months before we really get into the heat of SEC play. So with that, he's Sonny Ship. I'm Glenn West, and thanks for watching the Go 24/7 podcast.